Well, with COVID not leaving us throughout the world, what is it that we can do to beat inflammation with food? All of us, I think we have to be extra vigilant by eating the proper food so that, our immune system and our inflammation in our body doesn't happen because look what's happening all over the world right now. COVID is again to get us. So that's what I want to talk about today. And oh, I'm sorry. And then we have a naturopathic doctor, Dr. Anna, who will be talking about what type of foods can we load up on just to make sure that our inflammation in our body stays put. It doesn't flare up. Very important for all of us during COVID times. Hello, Dr. Anna. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, thank you for having me on today.
Yes, absolutely. And I was just telling our viewers, how COVID is surging again in a lot of other parts of the world, even in US, and how food, what is it that we can do to make sure we use food to make our inflammation in our body stays low, right? And that
Yes,
is the topic we are discussing with the naturopathic doctor, Dr. Anna here.
perfect. Well, thank you. I know you briefly touched upon, right, the role of inflammation. So I know inflammation usually gets a bad rap. Everyone's just like, oh, inflammation is bad.
Yes.
But for the most part, inflammation is really the natural response our body has to when we are in danger. So if we've injured ourselves or if we've come into contact with a virus or a bacteria, our body sees that as a threat and sends out, our immune system sends out these messengers, these pro-inflammatory cytokines that are actually meant to help us, right? They're there to help us heal that injury or to, attack that foreign invader. The big problem comes when that starts happening because we're not eating the proper foods. That triggers a pathway of inflammation, or when we are unfortunately stressed to the max under psychological emotional stress. And unfortunately this year it's kind of been coming at us from all different angles.
Yeah.
And so that leads to this chronic inflammation. So we're always on. Our immune system, our body is always perceiving danger, danger, danger. And the worry with that is that more and more literature has come to start associating and linking this chronic inflammation with a lot of chronic health disease. So from heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, anxiety and depression, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, diabetes, even some cancers. So you see this chronic inflammation extends far and wide. So if we can modulate our inflammation to only occur when we need it and to not always be turned on, that's going to be the key for better longevity. And even if we do come across, a chronic health condition, that we're better able to manage it.
So, okay, so how do we measure inflammation? Like, how do I know? Like, do I need to get a test or some symptoms that someone will be feeling that if there is inflammation that is kind of going a little bit out of control? Talk a little bit about that.
Right. So the problem, if we want to think of it that way with inflammation, is that sometimes for the most part, it is relatively silent.
Okay.
So we could feel like we're okay, but there could be underlying inflammation. So that's one scenario. And we can do things like blood work. Commonly, the thing that you'll see most often done just to assess if there's inflammation in the body is C-reactive protein. So it's an inflammatory marker in blood work. The only problem with these types of markers is they don't point us in the direction of where this inflammation is coming from. Is it from your diet? Is it because you're stressed out? Is it an infection?
Yeah.
But it gives us a good idea of, okay, there's an inflammatory process, so it begins our route to investigation. Then there's the other set of groups of individuals where they can feel symptoms. So especially as it pertains to diet and using food to relieve these symptoms, if a particular food, for example, is causing you probable inflammation down the line, you're going to start noticing some initial GI distress. So things like I eat X food and I start to feel bloated, or there's always a change in my bowel habit, and potentially I'm extra gassy, having more flatulence, belching. So those things in the GI proper. And that's, as I say, our gut is like a fortress. So that tells us that maybe the gut there isn't doing exactly what we want to do. And then that carries on to other areas in our body. So even things like joint pain can also be found with inflammation that's conducive through eating foods that might not be the best for us at that moment. And then other things like foggy brain, headaches, skin rashes, all these things can point to issue with the gut, which then will most likely be increasing or having this setup of inflammatory cascade in our body. And this, as you mentioned off the top, right, a lot of it has to do with our immune system, and a good portion of our gut really helps in having a good, strong immune system. You know, we have a good gut microflora that is also responsible for reducing inflammation, but also making sure our immune system is up and running well. So then when we couple all of these things, if something there is off, if either our gut health isn't strong enough, or we're always being triggered by different things in our environment to create inflammation, then we're going to start seeing that cascade. And some of these illnesses show up for us, right? Some of that chronic disease. So those are all things that point us in the direction of inflammation.
Wow, that's a bit scary the way you explained it, because it can lead to so many other chronic conditions, like you talked about, including cancer, Alzheimer's. I mean, those are serious conditions, right?
They are.
So what is it? So let's just come to, as a naturopathic doctor, what would be the toolkit, you know, on a higher level, from a food point of view, from herb point of view, that people should load up on, and what is it that they should avoid?
Right. Okay. So from a food point of view, so thinking about, okay, what should I avoid at the moment? Here, we're thinking two main groups. One is something that's very specific to you as an individual, which are things like food intolerances. So as I just mentioned a little bit ago, if we are eating a food that might be completely healthy, right? Like, oh, I love broccoli, but every time I eat it, you know, I feel nauseous. I get bloating. Maybe I even have headaches. I get this rash. That tells us that that particular food for you, maybe it's a protein in that food that when it's digested is having that immune type reaction that can then lead us down that path of, again, healing the gut so that you can hopefully reintroduce those foods. So those are things that are very specific to you. Now, across the board, when we're talking about foods that are notoriously inflammatory, right, it's number one on that list is really sugar. So, you know, I'm a self-proclaimed sweet tooth, so there's no judgment and no shame. It's just a matter of how much we're having and what kind of sugar we're eating. So the big culprits are, you know, the highly processed refined sugar, like our table sugar, and also high fructose corn syrup. That is, unfortunately, in everything. You pick up something to read the ingredient label, and there it is, right? In addition to artificial sugar or sweeteners like aspartame. They essentially trigger a response in our body that sends out these inflammatory messengers. And so the ingestion of sugar really kind of kickstarts that process. In addition to, it's not too friendly for our gut, so then we get hammered from both perspectives there. So, you know, sugar is something for us to be mindful of incorporating in our diet. And as you might expect, right, so processed foods, fast food, processed meats, again, same inflammatory process. So as they should then be really the exception and not the rule in our diet. Something also that we should really be starting to try to avoid, and there's more and more talk about it, is really these fats that were deemed for a long time to be healthy, or the healthier alternative, like the vegetable oils, safflower oil, canola oil, soy oil. These are actually high in pro-inflammatory omega-6. So when we can ingest a lot of omega-6 into our diet, it drives this inflammatory cascade. So we really need to start getting away from those types of fats. And unfortunately, again, much like the high fructose corn syrup, they seem to be in everything. From even our alternative milks, you'll see they add like sunflower oil to help it be a little thicker, to anything from like baked goods and everything in between, really. So those are the things to avoid. I also caution my patients, the ones that do drink or consume dairy products, the use of conventional dairy. So, I know that's a big topic on its own, and in the factory farming and what's happening, but essentially with conventional dairy, a lot of these cows, right, are being fed a lot of grain and corn, and so that then produces dairy products that are also high in omega-6, and then again, that inflammatory cascade. So when consuming dairy, I always recommend, if you can tolerate it, buying the best quality that you can afford, organic, pastured, grass-fed. It avoids some of that omega-6 that gets in there if they're just eating corn. And then anything else really that disrupts the gut, so things like other substances like alcohol can also potentially drive the inflammatory cascade. So sugar, the refined carbs, and the processed foods, the not so healthy oils, also conventional dairy and alcohol. So those are the foods that you want to avoid if we really want to start lowering our inflammation through food.
Okay, so someone had a question that they're asking about an alternative to an olive oil for cooking.
Right. So this is like a big hot topic, right? Like, okay, then what oil am I supposed to use? So you're like, everything has a pros and cons. The one right now that seems to be doing really well in terms of being safe enough to use in a high temperature is a good quality avocado oil. Okay. As long as it's 100% avocado oil, it really withstands the heat. And it's a relatively health-conscious option rather than using another type of vegetable oil there. So, dressing with the olive oil and cooking with an avocado oil when you are using higher temperature would be a good place to go.
Okay. So, all right. So I think that's a lot of really good information that you're giving. Thank you so much. Now, the foods, the foods which we should focus on, the groups at least, and the herbs.
Yes. So this is the better part of the conversation. We're like, yes, okay, what to avoid. So what can we actually include? And the benefit here is when we're eating for an anti-inflammatory perspective, these foods overall are going to help your health in general. So they're not just going to be okay for inflammation, then everything else I need to work towards. And so, as you might guess, off the bat is a whole plant-based foods are an excellent thing to start adding more into our diet as you tolerate them, right? Because they are going to have both anti-inflammatory and antioxidant compounds that help us stave off that oxidative stress that happens in our body when we're under inflammation. And so all the leafy greens that you enjoy and love, eating the rainbow starting with green is great. So the kale, the spinach, the collards, but also other fruits and vegetables that we see a lot. So a lot of the cruciferous vegetables, so that's like the broccoli, the cauliflower, and bringing in also some of the roots. So like things like beets, that have a lot of what we call like polyphenols, so like that vibrant red color, and other fruits, particularly like berries and cherries, are also excellent in terms of their antioxidant compounds. So basically anything you can find in your produce aisle is a go, unless it's an intolerance for you, and then we can tweak that a little bit. Sure. And then bringing in the omega-3. So instead of focusing on those omega-6, bringing in omega-3. So where do we get omega-3? So for the individuals that eat animal protein, that would be like fish, like cold water fatty fish, like salmon, sardines, herring, lake trout. But if you don't enjoy that, or you don't eat animal protein, adding things in like chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, walnuts can be a great way to bring in through food a good quantity of omega-3. So plant-based foods are omega-3 foods. Now, when we talk about things like herbs or spices, what we can do in terms of culinary, like bringing them into our diet, one that's quite used is turmeric. So great in terms of culinary effects, and it's going to also have a great anti-inflammatory compound. It's why it's so highly used for a lot of the inflammatory conditions as a high dose supplement, but we can also bring it in through food, in addition to other herbs like ginger, rosemary. Those are great anti-inflammatories, cinnamon as well, and then all the yummy things like garlic too are also quite potent anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. So when we're looking to cook, having fun, using spices to our advantage, in addition to then in addition, I would add, I know sometimes when we think food, we don't really think of drinks, but things like green tea are high antioxidant potential. So if you need a little caffeine, can't tolerate a little bit of coffee, then green tea is a great add-on because of its benefits. Its high antioxidant capacity, like either green tea or a matcha, if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous, and like that earthy flavor, are good supports through our diet without necessarily having to use a supplement that we can really build in.
There's a lot of good and amazing, very valuable information to people who are watching, and this is something easy to do. All of us can incorporate all these food that you're talking about, these spices. I mean, turmeric has so much research out there, for anti-inflammatory. And it's widely used in a lot of cuisines, like, as a curry, you put the thing. So anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up?
Right. So I just want to let everyone, sit and marinate with like the power, right? I know sometimes it's very cliche. We all say, food is medicine, but it really does have quite a role. We know how diet can really affect us one way or another, even when we are sick, right? So it doesn't mean that we will never see adversity or chronic disease if we have that perfect diet, but it really does strengthen us and really make us more resilient no matter what we're up against. But in addition to diet, being mindful of how much we move our bodies, how good or not our sleep is, in addition to how we manage our stress. Those are going to be the core foundation of really helping moderate that inflammation. But starting with diet is a great place to begin, to start nourishing our body with what it needs, so that we can then build in the remaining foundations.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's, again, a lot of research on mindfulness, yoga therapy, breathing techniques. I mean, that's a completely different topic. I mean, and that helps with the inflammation and longevity and, cleansing of your mind, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Anna, for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing,
Thank you for having me.
Session, amazing information, and yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yes, absolutely. And we are coming up with the programs that are affordable and accessible to everyone, which we are launching in literally within this month of April. So stay tuned, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for your support. And thank you so much, Dr. Anna, for being with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.